Thank you for being here with us today. Please introduce yourself, including your name, job, area of expertise, and role in the event.
Hello, my name is Karolis Kinčius, and I'm a Chief Specialist and Project Manager at Ministry of Environment in Lithuania, a Construction and Territorial Planning Policy Group. I'm an ESPON contact point as well as monitoring committee representative. Primarily, I work with public participation in territorial planning processes, as well as I review territorial planning documents for municipal territorial planning development. And I also work with various initiatives. The latest one is New European Bauhaus. At the Roundtable, I was moderating the second part of the event, where I discussed various planning instruments with our colleagues and ESPON representatives.
How does urbanization affect the sustainability of environmental, economic, and social systems? And could you give some examples?
Yeah, I think this is a very big question. Perhaps you could write like a book on each of those aspects to urbanization. But I think the key word here is urbanization. And we have to ask, how does it happen? Does it happen sustainably, or does it happen not sustainably? For economy and society, obviously, urbanization is an important factor because it enforces economic growth, employment, and demographic growth as well. Usually, when we think of places, they have a certain gravity that pulls resources and people to move to those places, and that helps to create new networks and opportunities. However, if we think about chaotic urbanization, and lack of planning, I think we run into various problems that are related to environmental footprint, usually loss of agricultural land, because that's the common shift from greenfields to brownfields, and as well as overall impact on authorities to try and distribute resources at an efficient manner. So that creates a whole lot of problems, obviously, and we want to avoid those. When it comes to examples, I think in order to achieve or seek for sustainable urbanization, we have to try and transform the territories within the urbanized regions itself rather than trying to expand outwards. And one good example I think I could use is the Paupys district at Vilnius city, which was a poor area with an industrial background. And there were abandoned industrial buildings and factories. So that territory was transformed not only to simple housing solutions, but as an overall multi-use complex territory that is now really vibrant and livable place for the citizens.
Could you tell us more about the specific challenges Lithuania is or will be facing in the future in terms of urbanization?
I think there are a lot of factors and challenges that we are facing. Probably we can't really name all of them. But I think Lithuania, like many places also across Europe, observes a lot of rather chaotic developments, as well as more diffuse types of developments in other municipalities that may not have particularly strong urban centers around them. I think that also is a problem because when we think of shrinking regions, we are thinking that, well, we have to somehow recover them, but municipalities actually struggle to attract investment in these places, and that also creates conditions for quite chaotic developments that has to be addressed. Well, also in that sort of line of thinking, I think that's why we need a lot of public debate, and that's why this is also a challenge to be on the same page and across different levels. Not only, at national level where we all agree, or at the EU level, or at seminars like, we had already with ESPON colleagues, we all agree on certain things, but on the local level, sometimes it's really hard to have the same opinions, especially also the challenges with the public in itself. For example, we had Urban Forum. It's an annual event that we do every year, and all specialist planners and strategists agree that densification is a good strategy in improving sustainable urbanization. But for instance, public has quite a negative association with such strategy because a lot of times they see that as a way that the green infrastructure is being developed with infrastructure and housing and etc., which causes like these public conflicts as well. I think what Urban also highlighted in our spin-off was that in Lithuania we kind of lack cooperation as well, and there's a bit too much competition between authorities, especially in these like regions and cities that are within the region, municipalities that are surrounding the administrations, and that creates kind of like a competition for these citizens and for land and etc., which is quite a complicated challenge to deal with. So I think these are the main challenges. Perhaps we can mention some of rather cultural challenges that we were discussing also in the seminar. We addressed that there is this sort of cultural idea that people want to have a bit more individualistic life and move outside the cities and have their own house, their own garden. And that's sort of like a Westerner idea, as we call it, of good, happy life, let's say. So I think that has definitely some impact also on how things are unfolding on the ground. And in the future, I think these challenges are going to remain. We hope we can deal with them. But with the development of Rail Baltica line in the near future is going to be quite an impactful event, I think, because it's going to cut down the travel times from Vilnius to Kaunas by almost an hour. So that's going to create a whole new agglomeration and a whole new perspective for the region. So it's going to be a lot of challenges to deal with this impact and what pressures is going to put on the land use.
How can planners and policymakers develop strategies and intervene to ensure that urbanization is the most sustainable possible?
Yeah, thank you. I think if the question is how, I think firstly we have to improve our communication between all stakeholders. So we have to address this problem between all levels and agree that this is actually a problem that we want to deal with, and that we try to have a strategy that can work and actually be implemented efficiently and effectively. I think for many countries like Lithuania, for example, and considering the context and background, perhaps more novel stimulus and some specialists that come with experience and passion and love for this sort of topic. I think it's a very important thing as well that can be a big driver and sort of this cultural understanding why this matters and how we can achieve those things. But from more sort of technical perspective, I really like what Giancarlo mentioned also in the discussion. You simply can't copy or just transfer policies from other EU countries and expect them to work. Like, we really must understand in what context these policies were founded, and then try to understand and measure how that context compares to the context of ours specifically, and understand whether that policy can be implemented now and here, or whether it needs a lot of tweaks to it. But certainly, in any case, you can be very well inspired by many policies, and you can try and find the design that works for you best. I think also what David mentioned was very important. I think the idea that you have to combine densification and containment strategies together. You can't just like focus on one or the other. You have to find a way to communicate that between the levels as well. So that is an important role of these strategies and instruments. And another probably big factor is just a strong commitment from political leaders. It's a difficult task, obviously, but planners have to show the way, obviously, and then the administration or the leaders have to walk that walk, I think. So planners can do only that much to some extent. We can only present the right data, evidence, and instruments and practices that can be useful, but there must be definitely good public debate and good political will to address all these issues and strategies.
What are the current Lithuanian strategies to reach sustainable urbanization?
Well, in the last 5-6 years, the Ministry of Environment worked very heavily on the National Comprehensive Plan, which was approved in the last year, September, by the government. And this is the pivotal document in sustainable land use planning for the whole country. And it is the main and key strategy to trying to achieve sustainable urbanization goals for Lithuania until 2030. I think this instrument also is very important because it used this approach of consultation, the heavy consultation with various actors and ministries, to try and integrate various strategies that can be then literally seen on the maps and understood by all the actors that were involved in making this document. As well, the comprehensive plan highlights the concept of densification and actually shows what urban forms at what municipal levels are most useful and most making sense for the municipalities to develop the good urban structures. As well, it highlights the hierarchy of urban centers, which shall provide a bit more clarity for various municipalities of the roles that they're taking in the whole context of their municipality. Also, with other instruments, we do have a law on territorial planning, which is highlighting the need for sustainable territorial development, as well as Chief Engineer Anton presented another law for infrastructure planning for municipalities, which also came into force last year. So we're still trying to understand how it works and what outcomes come out of it. But the idea behind this law is actually that municipalities are demanded to define the territories of priority development for infrastructure. And that helps to also collect some taxes for it and help municipalities develop this infrastructure in a more sustainable manner. Also, at national level, we have various recommendations and guidelines and norms related to territorial development. So, as I mentioned before, we are administratively reviewing municipal planning documents, so we can track and see whether the municipalities actually trying to keep these recommendations and how they follow these guidelines and norms when they develop in territories.
During the roundtable, there were presentations from different actors and regions discussing the
Presentations were
challenges
great
of and
all
responses
around
to the
during the
topic.
event.
Could you tell
I
us
think
more
I
about the
mentioned
conclusions and
a few
insights
details
taken from this
already about
roundtable?
some of the good outcomes that we discussed. But I think one nice takeaway was Urban highlighted how strategies at national level, especially, sometimes lack measurable targets when it comes to reducing land take. So that is something important to take note for many actors that would like to improve these strategies and understand how they can maybe monitor better or just have quite clear reduction targets. Also, Anton quite highlighted from Vilnius municipality, the chief specialist, how important it is to communicate with stakeholders and especially the construction sector. So to make sure that they also are aware what are these instruments, how they can be used effectively, so that does not create a situation where you're trying to integrate an instrument that can not be like efficient or sustainable from economic perspective as well. And you have to trust each other in that sort of aspect as well. What Giancarlo also mentioned, I think was quite interesting, is that urbanization and sustainability is not only a matter of instruments and public authorities or planners to deal with. There is some key drivers like money and power relations that are important to understand, and that this actual political will and public will to have an impact for sustainable land development and territorial development is a key actually in trying to succeed. So another probably key element is that each place's needs are unique and interventions have to be set for those places, not just copied, as I mentioned before. So we have to compare these contexts and we have to understand how policies can be fitted for the right reason and for the right context. And as well as multi-level governance, it's important. We have to try and seek these synergies and understand how it goes through different levels and how we can make these levels communicate better also. So these are probably some of the key takeaways. I think everyone's opinion is quite similar. It's a
And what
very
is your
complex
opinion on these
topic, and
findings,
it's
and
it's
what
not
could be
so
expanded
simple
on?
because, as mentioned before, we can't think just instruments. There's politics to it. There's construction sector, which is huge, plays a big role in it. There's people who have their own idea and land and properties, and they want to do certain things with those things, and that all actually combines into this big complex situation that we are at now. But one thing that probably could be expanded on, I think, is that Erblin also addressed that the idea of cooperation. And I think in sustainable land use planning, we're still looking at how this cooperation can be enhanced, and perhaps we could try and see what instruments and tools can help us to improve cooperation on local level, especially to make sure that we reduce this local competition and try to improve cooperation, because it seems that that is a way to go, and that can be helpful to achieving these these goals. I think when it comes to cooperation, the great project that ESPON is also doing now is Actaria for sub-territorial development. We also did a spin-off on this project for Lithuania as well, where we looked into Vilnius-Kaunas partnerships and also coastal region. So I think that's a really interesting project that can be valuable for many countries as well. So check that out. So there's still lots to learn, but we're moving to the right direction.